Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you may be at this point in time, or good evening for that matter. Welcome everyone to the CEO Webcast featuring my daughter, Christine Handy, a wife, mother, breast cancer survivor, and author of the best-selling book, Walk Beside Me. I'm a CEO member, Tim Nani, and I will be today's moderator. But before we begin, I'd like to provide you with a few housekeeping items. To view your toolbar, click on the orange arrow in the top right corner of your screen. You can ask a question during the Q&A session in one of two ways. First, you can type your inquiry in the question box, or you may raise your hand by clicking on the yellow hand icon in your toolbar. When it is time for Q&A, you will be announced and then unmuted so that you can ask a question over your phone or your computer via voice. At the conclusion of the live session, we will also ask you to fill out a short evaluation form that will help us plan for future webcasts. Now, allow me to introduce Christine. As mentioned, Christine is our second daughter of four, and she has a fantastic husband and two great sons. She lives in Dallas, Texas, and also in Miami Beach. As a young girl, she was always ambitious and wanted to be a model, very determined. She had a wonderful life with family and friends after a successful modeling career, during which she was Miss January on the SMU calendar 4 years in a row. Amazing. One time, Jackie and I were actually driving down the toll road and saw this beautiful girl in a bikini off in the distance on a billboard. And as we got closer, the person became more familiar, only to find out that was our young daughter, Christine, in the bikini on the billboard, advertising swimsuits for a company called Just Add Water. Not what we expected. I have been a board member of Cancer Treatment Centers of America for over 20 years and have met many women of various ages diagnosed with breast cancer. But I've never appreciated the trauma more until I heard from my daughter that she had breast cancer. Honestly, it took all the air out of my lungs. I did not really know what to do. Chris is an amazing young woman, and I promised her a trip of her life after she got through all the treatment and became cancer-free. And she did, and we are. We're going to Israel the 1st of April. So now allow me to present my beautiful daughter, Christine, to tell you her story, the Unstoppable Woman, a Survivor Story.
Thank you, Dad, for that great introduction. I'm so humbled by your words, a little teary, actually. I've had a lot of introductions over the last year, but that was quite possibly my favorite. My journey began as a young woman, 11 years old, who really wanted to start a modeling career. And that journey became really what my self-worth was wrapped up in for many, many years. And that's who I became, was that person thinking that my self-image and my self-worth was wrapped up into what I look like. I had 3 brushes with death starting in 2006 with a colon resection, which turned into, I almost lost my life on the table when I had some blood transfusions because of doctor error. The next, not really brush with death, but unfortunate incident was in 2011 when I had a simple torn ligament in my right wrist. And that turned into an infection, which eventually led to the full fusion of my right wrist. and left me permanently disabled in my right arm. And then 6 weeks after my arm was fused, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And 80% of all women who are diagnosed with breast cancer do not have the gene and don't have any family history of it, and I'm in that category. So it was a total surprise to me. But what all these things did for me was create a great story, and I put that story into this book, which is, I believe, on your screen. My book is called Walk Beside Me, and it's really my journey through all of these health battles and the relationships that sustained me, not just through my friends and family, but also through my relationship with God. So I'm here to speak about it and hopefully help other people who are going through similar journeys or just journeys of pain and suffering, because I truly believe that there is always purpose in pain. So I hope you can read my book. If not, just listen to my story. And Jean, you can put on the next slide. So these are a couple pictures of the beginning when I started to model. I was working for an agency, first an agency in St. Louis and then an agency in Dallas, and then I worked for Elite Worldwide. These are a couple modeling pictures, young and healthy, and had not a worry in the world about having any health issues. And I got married and had sons, and little did I know what was ahead in front of me. And of course, you never, when you take your vows, when you get married, you never really realize in sickness and health. And my husband has been quite a trooper for all the health issues that I have had. Next slide, please. This is a picture of one of the casts that were made specifically for my arm in 2011. I had around 16 different casts that were made for my wrist. There are a lot of people that have health issues because of doctor malpractice and misdiagnosis, and unfortunately I was one of them. For 7 months I had an infection in my wrist that was left undetected. And so instead of one simple night in the hospital with an IV in my arm with antibiotics, my doctor sent me to physical therapy for 7 months, 5 days a week. And what happened was, because that infection was misdiagnosed, and every day that I was going to physical therapy, every single day that I went to physical therapy, they were manipulating my wrist in ways that I was breaking every bone in my wrist. So when I finally went to see a second opinion 7 months later, they detected the infection and realized what had happened. Next slide, please. This is just one picture one day I took of my wrist. The doctor that I had seen, and it's interesting because we all think that we have the best doctors and we go to the best orthopedic clinics and we have access to this great medical world in the United States, and that's all true and fine. But we need to trust our gut and not necessarily our doctors. For me, my doctor was a Stanford grad, and he was at the best orthopedic clinic, and I really just trusted him. But all the while, he was telling me that the swelling and the pain in my arm was really in my head. And it was kind of a misfire between my brain and my arm, and they called the condition RSD. Obviously, that was a misdiagnosis, and he didn't take the necessary steps to figure out that it was an infection. But on a day-to-day basis, this picture is pretty explanatory of all the trauma that was going on inside of my body. So I think it's really important that, well, for anybody listening, that you should really trust your gut and not necessarily the doctor. Next slide, please. Anyway, this is a picture of when my arm was fused, and this was 6 weeks before I was diagnosed with breast cancer. That is a PICC line in my arm that is threaded to my heart, and I had an IV hanging out of my arm in an effort to kill the infection, which it eventually did. Thankfully, I didn't have any other issues with my arm other than the fusion. Next slide, please. This is after the fusion, and this is where the doctor put bone grafts and grafted my arm and fused it. So we all have 32 different functions in our wrist, and once my arm was fused, I have none. Next slide, please. Six weeks after my arm was fused, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, going back to the modeling days, I had put a lot of weight in what I look like, and I really felt like my self-worth was tied into external and not necessarily who I was inside. And having to cut my hair and losing my hair during chemo was pretty traumatic, as it would be for any person, but in particular for somebody that cared so much about their external appearance. I went so far as to, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I decided that I was going to plot my suicide, because after I had been bullied for a long time by the doctor with my arm, I really had no, my friends and my family had really stuck by my side for a full year. I couldn't drive, I couldn't cook for that whole year with my arm, and I really couldn't take care of myself, much less my children. And so when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I just didn't feel worthy of asking my friends and family I knew for at least a year, for all that help and dependence. And really that became a pride issue with me, because instead of asking for help, I felt that my life wasn't worth saving, and so I decided that I was going to kill myself. But my son was in boarding school, my older son. He was 14 at the time, and I had an 11-year-old son at home. And when I decided to kill myself, I waited for my son to get home from boarding school, because I was going to say goodbye to him. Fortunately, by the grace of God, truly, and by my friends showing up for me each day and convincing me that not only would they stand by me, but that God would never forsake me, then by the time my son did come home from boarding school to see me, he had gotten in trouble at boarding school, and so he was delayed by coming home to visit. And so by the time he came home, I was all into fighting for my life. And I realized at that point, after all the suffering that I had gone through, that there was purpose in the story, and that it would help people, and that there was going to be something great that came out of this. And it really, truly, something great has come out of this. I have written this book, and it's not the book that's been so great, but it's the fact that that book has helped people. I get emails, and I get people that reach out to me who have read my book, who have been impacted by my book, and that really is the purpose for all the pain that I went through, I believe. And by telling my story and being so honest about my story in my book, I think it's really been helpful to people to look at how my life has changed. And for me, depending on what I look like for so many years to who I am now is a very different person. I now, my self-worth is not tied up into what I look like anymore, and my self-worth is not tied up into the things that I have. My true identity is to serve other people and to live a life of giving and not taking. So I've had a full transformation in my life, and it's really been through these illnesses and through the people that have stood by me, which is why my book is called Walk Beside Me. I've had incredible people sustain me during this journey, including my parents and my sisters and my friends. Next slide, please. So this is a cute picture of my family, my boys and my husband. So when I was getting my hair cut before it fell out for chemotherapy, we all went to the salon, and that was the day that my hairdresser cut my hair, and my boys showed up with these blonde wigs that I would wear and figure out how to use, which took a little while. Thankfully for my mother, she helped me when my hair originally fell out. Next slide, please. This was one of the first times I was at chemo, and I had friends, fortunately, come with me. And the smile on my face is indicative of how I changed even within the first 3 weeks of getting diagnosed with cancer. I'd gone from being feeling such despair and questioning why me and having this enormous pity party to feeling joy that there were people surrounding me and walking on this journey with me and feeling able to fight this fight. And I knew it would be a long journey because I had 15 months of chemotherapy and 28 rounds. But when you have people that you can depend on and surround you, then you know you can get through it. Next slide, please. So this was my final day of chemo, and my friends had a party for me, and my father came to my final chemo, and my mom did too. Yeah, so the physical transformation is incredible.
So I just wanted to add, if you look at Christine in that picture, she looks like a little girl. And unfortunately, she lost an extraordinary amount of weight. I think she weighed about 95 pounds at this time, and Mother and I were extremely concerned about that. And went to her oncologist and to suggest that maybe they would consider some nutrition because she was literally starving, as you can see in this picture. And fortunately, we were able to change the situation where she was able to retain some nutrition and get back to who she really is. But I think the picture itself is pretty staggering.
So the beauty of this picture is really I look at this picture with different eyes. If I had seen this picture and I'd seen all of my scars, a few years before this, I would have been devastated that, I didn't have the perfect hair and the perfect figure, and I was, didn't have any scars. So the beauty of this picture is for me to look back and see the great transformation. And I am so grateful for that transformation because the person that I am now, I truly love. And the person that I was before, I'm not sure I would hang out with that person anymore. Next slide, please. This is a great picture. That's actually a wig that I was wearing at the time. This was after chemo, and this was when my journey with writing my book began. And I knew that by writing this story, it would help people. And so this is where I feel like my life, my true life, really started. The difference in who I was, and the difference in how I lived my life was really during this time, and I am very grateful for that. And I really look back on my journey, and not with pitiful despair. I look back on it and feel very grateful for the transformation and for the opportunity to share my story. I really am grateful that God gave me this great story because I believe that I'm able to speak about it and to get it out there, and that's a true blessing for me. Next slide, please. So thank you so much for listening to my story and listening to what my book is about. And if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take them.
Chris, I see one question here. The question is, if you had one message to send to the parents of children who get a cancer diagnosis, what would it be? How can they best support their children? So maybe I'll just comment. I would just continue to tell you how much you love them and spend as much time as you can physically with them, supporting them. Fortunately, Chris's mother, Jackie, was able to help her many, many times when she was desperate and in need. And I think that love made a very big difference. But I'll turn this over to Chris at this point in time.
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it. I can't imagine what it feels like as a parent to watch their child suffer with any illness, but cancer. life-threatening illness would be horrible. I have 2 boys, and I can't imagine if they suffered. I think that just my parents showing up time and time again, my journey was very long, and it's difficult for people to continue to show up like that. But my parents never wavered. My parents showed up for me more than I ever in my life, and I will never forget that. I think just showing up, it's not about really what you can give somebody. It's really just being there physically and just them knowing that you will be there and that you will, just picking up the phone and being able to talk to them freely. I think that just showing up is the most important message that a parent can give to their child, especially when a child is suffering at such a difficult age. It's really not a normal time to go through anything like that. And all of those illnesses were unusual in itself, and my parents just continued to show up for me.
We have another question. Chris's question is, could you utilize any alternative medicine techniques during your recovery from your arm injury or cancer? If so, which were most effective? I'll comment on that just briefly because I've been on the board of Cancer Treatment Centers of America for a very, very long time. And one of the commitments of Cancer Treatment Centers of America is a holistic approach to treating people. And I've witnessed, understand that nutrition and other forms of naturopathic medicines can be really helpful in mitigating some of the issues with cancer. But I'll let Chris talk about it as it relates to her own experience.
Yeah, so the question was, are there any alternative medications, or did I use any alternative medicine techniques during my recovery with my arm or my cancer? That's a good question. It's interesting because a lot of people that I knew would offer up different alternative medication for me. For my arm, I am in continuous pain even today. I don't take any traditional pain medication, but I do take ginger on a daily basis, and I also take turmeric, and that has helped me tremendously. I was fortunate enough when I was going through my treatment with my cancer. Again, with my arm, I didn't realize that I had an infection, so I didn't realize that I needed to beef up my immune system at the time. But when I was going through chemotherapy, I was able to hire a nutritionist, and that helped me tremendously. And I continue to use some of those ideas that she gave me even today with juicing and massage and acupuncture.
Thanks, Chris. There's another question. Just give me, it just popped down. How do you feel about recent guidelines for women getting mammograms being changed, i.e. that you won't need to get mammograms as frequently as they once thought?
I've actually researched this a fair amount because I'm now one of Fox News' breast cancer experts and early detection advocates. So I've had the luxury of being able to research this particular question. It's upsetting to me that they're trying to change this, and it's confusing to people. I've spoken about this a lot. Mammograms really need to be started at the age of 40. I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 42. I actually felt the lump, and I had skipped my mammogram that year because I had the PICC line in my arm because of my infection. But starting mammograms at 50 is a really dangerous idea, and I believe that it's probably driven by insurance companies. That's my opinion, and I do have some basis for that knowledge. But I do think that starting mammograms at 40 is a minimum. I had my first mammogram at 35 because I have dense breasts, and I think in particular for women, 50% of our population of women have dense breasts, and it's very difficult to pick up lumps from a mammogram if you have dense breasts. I believe I'm a strong believer in self-detection and once a month, and also seeing a physician once a year to do a self-diagnosis, to detect a lump. I think that it's important that we also, there's this thing called live biopsies, and they're not out yet, but there's hope for a future for breast cancer and diagnosis, where, once we have mammograms, which is a great form of defense, but a mammogram detects the breast cancer tumor once a tumor is formed. I think it's really important that we try to detect tumors before they're formed, and there's a lot of research that this is coming, and that's very hopeful.
There's another question. One of the concepts discussed with my colleague Lee was the concept of paying attention to who's in your boat. Can you expand on this?
Well, that has a lot of different answers, but my opinion of who's in your boat is always, who do you surround yourself with? Spiritually, physically, you end up becoming who, not just what you eat. It's funny, we've always been taught you are what you eat, and I believe that's true. You are who you surround yourself with. So who is in your boat? Who's going to stand by you in the hard times? And unfortunately, we don't really know that until we go through hard times. But I think for me, I chose the right people a long time ago, and unbeknownst to me, I would go through all these things. But by the grace of God, I was given the right people. The right people were put into my life, and so I think being in the right boat is determining who the right people are around you, and really paying attention to who the people maybe that you need to get off the boat and decipher who's really going to be there for the long haul.
Chris has another question, and it specifically says, can you describe the nature of your breast cancer, the treatment or surgery involved, the recovery, and what medication you currently use? My wife had breast cancer 11 years ago. Well, first of all, I hope your wife is doing fantastic, and our prayers are with her. But Chris, could you address this?
Yes, so I was diagnosed at the age of 42 with stage 2 breast cancer, and it was triple positive: estrogen positive, progesterone positive, and HER2 positive. 20% of the population is HER2 positive, which is, it's not a great diagnosis, because you have a chance. It's difficult to treat. And I was diagnosed in 2012, actually on October 1st, the first day of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I saw a lot of pink that first month that I was diagnosed, which was difficult at the time, but now I've embraced it. I did 28 rounds of chemotherapy, and I did adriamycin, which was my first round. I did 4 rounds of that, which is called in the breast cancer world the red devil. And then I did Taxol after that. And then after that, I did Herceptin. And Herceptin was the chemotherapy that killed the HER2 portion of that. Currently, I'm on tamoxifen, which has its own set of side effects. Fortunately for me, I've been able to cut my dose, and so its ramifications in my body are less than they used to be. I'm a big believer in tamoxifen and estrogen preventers in your body. Typically, in the past, it was 5 years that they put women on that drug after they were diagnosed with breast cancer. Now it's 10 years. There's some controversy over that. Some people think it should be longer. There's a great deal of women that have reoccurrences between after 10 years. And so there are a lot of doctors addressing this and trying to figure out if you stay on these types of medications like tamoxifen, if that were to help, keep this disease away from women. I hope by the time that, I hope in the next couple of years, they will have better drugs for women who've had breast cancer.
There are no further questions at this point in time. And so I guess we'll thank everybody for taking the time to participate in Chris's story. And special thanks, Christine, for sharing your very personal experience. If you wouldn't mind, we'd appreciate very much if you would complete the evaluation form. And now we'd also ask everyone attending this live presentation, as I mentioned, to complete the presentation, the part of the evaluation form. And wish everybody a great day. Thank you again.
Thank you.